so now paragraph 27 describes a CSIS intelligence product that was first disseminated on October 1st, 2019, and then pulled back on October 10th, 2019, and it was pulled back. And Sarah's conclusion is that the report was pulled back by Director Vigneault, but after conversation with the NSIA, and it says at her request. And so we'll just take that for what it is. And so what I'm trying to understand is the sequencing of these events relative to the briefing you said took place with you at the end of October. And so I guess at the end of October 2019, after the election, were you aware of this CSIS report in any way? Did you know that it had been issued? Did you know that it had been pulled back?
I'm sorry, just before the witnesses answer, and I'm sorry to interrupt my friend.
Of course.
But my friend's questions do sort of assume that what is in the NSIR report happened, and I think it would be fair to the witness and appropriate to first ask them whether they have any knowledge of those things having actually happened.
That's a very reasonable position, and so assuming that what the chronology here is correct, and you might take issue with it, but let's assuming this is correct, then what I'm trying to understand is the relationship between the issuance and pulling back of the CSIS intelligence assessment of the Don Valley North events and the subsequent briefing you had by the Privy Council office at the end of October, as you put it. And were you aware at that time that CSIS had issued this report or not?
So I was unaware of any of this until I was briefed immediately following the election, which is after this time period in the note that you're referring to, or the document you're referring to. And at that time, I received a verbal brief from I believe it was the clerk, on what she had learned during the writ period. But I can't speak to the inner kind of machinations of what was going back and forth between officials during the election period.
I understand. Okay, if we could scroll down to paragraph 30. Then here it references an attempt by the PCO Assistant Secretary of Security and Intelligence, who prepared a memorandum for the NSIA recommending that the NSIA brief you, Ms. Telford, on CSIS's assessment of Don Valley North. And it's not clear if that briefing happened. Are you able to tell us if, in fact, the NSIA did brief you after December 2019 on CSIS's assessment of Don Valley North?
So
here comes the lie.
I can't speak to, again, the internal between a PCO official and another PCO official about them discussing whether or not they should brief me. But I certainly did receive updates, I guess you could call them, over time in various briefings on this subject. And I mean, the main thing I can think of in December 2019 would have been around a flag that came to us around a parliamentary committee.
Yeah, the Canada-China Committee, I recall that in your evidence.
Yeah.
But did you receive, I guess what I'm wondering is that it seems that there was an attempt within the Privy Council office, or at least at some place, to have the NSIA brief you regarding CSIS's assessment of the Don Valley North nomination. And I'm wondering if that briefing ever happened.
I don't believe we've had any record of that, but I would need to go back and look at the log of meetings that was provided to the commission, but I don't have any recollection of that.
Okay, and then thank you. And then so finally, I hope we could take this down and put up Commission 363, which is the NSICOP report. And if we could go to PDF page 39. And I understand that you've all read this. And so, and this is, again, the NSICOP's conclusion, and take it for what it is, regarding Don Valley North. And because I'm short of time, I just want to note for the record that there are a number of very specific allegations or conclusions that NSICOP makes about the nomination in 2019, and it footnotes various CSIS intelligence products. And those conclusions have to do with IDs and buses and funding and coercion, and there's a number of very specific allegations made. And so I'm going to take it you're aware of the contents of those allegations here.
Yes.
So thank you, Mr. Clow. And so Ms. Telford, did you want to add to that, or?
Yes, I mean, we can't get into which intelligence we did and didn't see, but we have been briefed on this file over time. And the only thing I would just add is that we did have, and I think you've heard people speak to this already at the inquiry, that there are, and actually you also heard from Mr. Broadhurst on this in stage 1, that there are some concerns around some of this information.
So then, thank you for that. So my final question is this then. So it's in the Insider report, it states that the Prime Minister finally received a briefing about Don Valley North from CSIS on February 9th of 2021. And I'm wondering if any of you can comment on whether the Prime Minister whether these specific allegations were disclosed by CSIS to the Prime Minister in that February 2021 briefing.
I'm not sure that we can speak to which intelligence was shared when. I'd look to others to.
So maybe I can try to assist. This is a briefing on February 9th, 2021 that I think my friend is referring to, and that Mr. Travers has already described that in public evidence, described that briefing and what part, if any, Don Valley North played in it. So perhaps he can just repeat that. Maybe he can be shown that part of his transcript, but I think he's probably ready to do it.
Yeah, I am ready to do it, and thank you. As I've previously described, this was essentially an overview of the state of foreign interference in Canada.
I see.
And it covered a range of countries. It covered a range of tactics that they use, and I have previously testified that Don Valley North did come up as an example. I can't speak to the specific details and exactly what was raised in raising that example, but it was a portion of a much broader conversation with a broader focus.
I see. I hadn't made that connection, and that's actually quite helpful. And so, and that's one final thing. And so, how long was this briefing, if you happen to recall? I'm sure you've been to many. And in that briefing, what proportion of that do you think would have been devoted, to the best of your recollection, to Don Valley North?
So my recollection is, I believe the briefing was scheduled for about an hour. I wouldn't be able to tell you how much longer it may or may not have run, but I don't think it was much beyond that period if it did. Be careful about what I can say in this setting, I would say that a number of countries were discussed, and within that, a number of the tactics and methods used were discussed, and so this came up as an example. So I would not say it was the majority of the briefing or even a substantial minority, but it was raised.
Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.